Hey, it's Jim again from the Moose Basin Shop and Bed and Breakfast here in Kapuskasing. I'm making this video finally making this video to help people interested in getting into ice fishing go about it in what I believe is the most cost-effective and risk-free way of getting an introduction into ice fishing. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm assuming that the people asking these questions don't have any gear, haven't done much or any open water fishing either, and also don't have any people in their social group that do any ice fishing. So I'm just assuming that this video is being made for people that are absolutely starting out completely new from scratch. So with that in mind, I will start by saying that if you're getting into ice fishing for whatever reason, the first thing you're going to need to do before you get on the ice is have a fishing license for yourself and whoever else you want to take out. Like, depending on why you want to get into ice fishing, maybe you and your partner want to go out and experience it, then you're both going to need fishing licenses. So make sure you have the appropriate amount of licenses for the appropriate amount of people that you're planning on getting into ice fishing with. And when you do that, read the literature, figure out what zone you're in, what the regulations are, what you can fish for, and also learn about the species that are available in your area. The more you know, the better prepared you're going to be to have a good time fishing and to be able to communicate what you want out of things. And when you're learning about that, get to know where the bait shops are and guides and hut rentals in your area, because that is pretty much my first recommendation for anyone getting into fishing, is that fishing, particularly some elements of ice fishing, can get very pricey. So if you want to do it safely the first time and not have to buy a lot of the equipment that you would need, especially if you don't know whether you're going to like it or not. Not everyone likes it. You might go out, try it once, and decide you don't like it. So with that in mind, I would recommend going to a guide or some sort of outfitter first, who preferably one that is willing to provide you with the rods and some gear to use, so you don't have to go out and buy all of it all at once. So my recommendation, if you want to get into it, is don't buy anything if you can avoid it for the first time. Hire somebody to take you out. Some places, or most places, are fairly cheap, and when it comes to getting an entire day out fishing, it's a very economical way of doing it, especially if you don't have to buy any of the lures and equipment, that you can just go out, have the holes drilled for you, have a hut or some sort of shelter ready for you, and have the gear all there. That is by far the most cost-effective way of doing it. If you end up not liking it, the only real wasted money was on that day and for the fishing license that you bought. But you're not going to be out on tackle or anything. But that being said, not everyone can schedule their lives around hut operator schedules. I realize that many hut operators just don't have vacancies. Many guides don't have vacancies, particularly in the more populated parts of Ontario, where that's where the population is, so that where a lot of new people might be looking at fishing, there might not be the availability for that. So with that in mind, if you cannot get someone to take you out with the gear, whether it be a guide, an outfitter that runs hut rentals that can rent you some equipment, or some friends who can get you out, and you're absolutely stuck buying the equipment for yourself, I do not recommend going out and buying the expensive stuff right off the bat. Most of the more expensive stuff is more finer tuned to different styles of fishing, different jigging techniques, different species to fish for. And if you're just starting out, you don't need to complicate it that much. What I use and what I would recommend any beginner is just something like this for a rod. This is just a 28-inch ugly stick, 6-pound test on it. And that's, again, a decent line, 6-pound test. It can handle most species you would be targeting on a multi-species day. Again, if you're looking at different rigging for different species, that is just an overall great beginner setup that can go out and handle most sizes of most species of fish. And I like the ugly stick because they're inexpensive. They're usually you can get them at most Canadian Tires or Walmarts. They're usually one of the less expensive rods on the shelf, and I find they're very durable, great for someone just getting out, or even someone that has been fishing as long as me. I still love them. I swear by them. Great beginner's rod. Now, I also would recommend getting a rod holder, because ice fishing, most places allow you to have 2 rods out. And if you just have a loose rod, if a fish takes it, your rod could be going down the hole. I've seen that happen several times. It's an expensive way to lose a fish and a rod. Now, these ones here are probably some of the simplest ones. You just set this beside the hole, and then the handle of your rod goes in there, and it just holds it. It holds it in place so it won't fall down the hole. Now, these $10 Canadian Tire, I think you can get them for, very rudimentary. There are lots of other, not necessarily rod holders, but there are other tip-ups that can be used. There are jaw jacker rod holders that'll set the hook for you. There's a whole bunch of different, more expensive variations of those. I'm just showing you the cheapest one. It's lightweight, portable, just giving you the necessities of what you need. You can also just build up a pile of slush and have that hold your rod, but those are a little bit more convenient, and they're a very cost-effective way of getting things done. And another thing you'll need is an ice scoop. Don't forget that. I recommend getting a metal one, because I find at least once a year, if you use a plastic one, for some reason or another, you'll end up stepping on it and you'll snap it, and then you don't have a scoop for the rest of the day. So I recommend getting a decent, durable metal scoop. And as once you get the holes drilled, if you're new to ice fishing, that hole is going to be full of slush. So you got to remove the slush out of it. That's what the scoop is for. But also on a cold day, that hole will start to freeze over every now and then. So you just take the scoop and you break the ice and clean the ice out of it. But that's why you need a scoop. And you will also need to get an auger. Now, again, this is why I insist on talking to bait shops or guides and talking about people in the know, because when it comes to an auger, I use a gas-powered auger up here in Kapuskasing because I find they're reliable, and I find that by the end of the winter, a lot of the time we are drilling through a lot of ice. Far too much ice for me to expect any renter or myself, anyone involved, to be using a hand auger to get down. It's just, the ice is too thick. But if you're doing most of your fishing in a place, for example, like Hoople Creek in Eastern Ontario, the ice typically never gets overly thick. A hand auger might be, if you're in good physical shape and can handle turning a few holes through some ice, then a hand auger would be good for there. And the price difference between them can be extreme. Like, you've got the handheld ones that you can see for like, I don't know, $60 to $80 in a lot of places, right up to like almost $1,000 battery operated ones. But keep in mind that if you're buying an auger, to buy it to suit your needs. And electrical will always be lighter than gas. The battery powered ones are almost always lighter than the gas powered ones. But again, it has to do with what you think the fishing is going to be like in your area, and buy it to suit the needs of what you're going to be doing. And back to dealing with the kind of fishing that you're going to be doing. If it's a little colder where you are, and you're planning on learning ice fishing, to be getting out, to be spending entire days out on the lake or out on a bay with family and friends, you're going to want to look into getting an ice hut and some form of heating supply for it. I really like the Otter and Clam, both those companies, for the ice shelters. They make some really good insulated thermal shelters. And I swear by the Buddy heaters. You can pretty much always get one version of them on sale at Canadian Tire. Propane powered. You just have to be very careful about making sure you're not draining the oxygen in the tent and keeping some good ventilation going, because always safety first. And so you'd want that, and obviously anything you put in the hut, tables, chairs, and all that, anything for comfort that you'd want. But you'd want to get if you're planning on going out all days, I recommend getting a hut that is suitable to the environment you're in. Again, if you're up north and dealing with -30, you absolutely need an insulated one. If you're down south and it's more mild, then a cheaper non-insulated hut with a little heater will do probably just as well where you are. But it's about buying to suit the location you're going to be fishing in. And if you're going to be going out early and late in the season, I recommend getting safety gear, like particularly an ice breaking bar, a spud bar, to make sure that the ice you're walking out on is safe to go out on. Later on in the year, when everyone has their huts and all that out, you still got to check, but you can be a little bit more secure and bring your auger out and just drill holes as you go. But either way, you want something to be able to check ice depth, and auger will suffice. So I guess you don't really need the spud bar, but just take the auger, keep drilling along the shoreline, make sure the ice is always safe where you are. And the last bit that I'm going to make some recommendations on are lures. It's you're fishing down a hole in ice fishing. So any gear you look at, it's got to be gear that is conducive to doing vertical jigging, just jigging it straight up and down. And the recommendations I make if you're just getting started is one thing, just a simple jig head. This is just a Northland Fireball jig. Very simple. You just stick your bait, live bait or plastic, on there, and you just jig it vertically. And there are different kinds of jigs too. That one is just a gumball jig. This one is what the manufacturer calls an Erie jig. It'll hold the bait up at the bottom. Good for certain kinds of fish. Every jig has its purpose, but I would recommend a good go-to jig just for starting is the simple gumball jig. It can be used in a variety of different ways, used with different jigging cadences and that, and different styles of fishing, and so it can be transferred very well into a multi-purpose jig if you continue fishing in the open water. But it also works as a great catch-all jig for ice fishing and just straight vertical jigging. Another style of bait that I like to keep in tackle boxes are glide baits. These are high caliber lures version of them. Again, you just jig these vertically, but when you jig these vertically, this tail makes them go up in an erratic way. So they have it's not just a straight vertical presentation. They will kind of kick out and go to the side and then fall down in a erratic way. It makes it look like a dead bait fish coming down. Another kind of bait I always keep in the tackle box are these simple blade baits here. Vertical jigging. I'll show you a couple different ones here. They're just basically all the same idea. Misshapen metal. Some flashy colors. Some have feathers tied to the bottom of them, like a little tip at the bottom. But they're all basically misshapen pieces of metal. And when you jig them, they go up and they fall down and they have kind of a flutter motion, again mimicking a dead injured bait fish or dead bait fish. And it's very common to tip those with the minnow. Like you can still apply live bait on them. It gives the fish something to focus in, plus a little bit of scent on them. And I find they are a good go-to depending on the size you're using. They'll catch just about anything. A general rule of thumb is if you're targeting fish that are smaller baits will catch more. Big fish will still go for small baits, but small fish cannot stomach big baits. Like if the bait is too big for the fish's mouth, the fish can't eat it, right? It makes sense. And the big fish will go for smaller baits. So I always like to downsize and go with smaller stuff in the winter. And next class of baits that I find, it's really the last class of baits that I use in for ice fishing, are the vertical jigging. I just call them rattle baits. This is Rapella's version of it. It's a little one, micro rattle. They come in all shapes and sizes and body shapes. You can see that's kind of a shad shape, whereas this is different shape there, different colors. And you also have ones like this, but like I said, all different shapes and sizes, all patterns, and a characteristic of these is they rattle. So the sound helps bring the fish in. Now, most of those baits there, you can find versions of them at Canadian Tire, Walmart, and a lot of those ones like the blade baits and some of the rattle baits and the glide baits and that you can pick up in sets. Then they'll come in like 4-packs or 5-packs. Lunker Hunt makes some, Berkley, some of the brands you can see at Canadian Tire or Walmart. You don't have to spend a ton on them, and they have lots of different versions to choose from. You're going to see some that have dangling pieces of metal that will make noise when they fall. Some of them will have rattles in them. Some of them will have light tubes to insert in them. Lots of different varieties for all those different kinds of gear. But the bottom line is, if you're looking for cheap and effective gear, a lot of the times, all those lures will get the job done in some way on the hard water. And all those lures can be found relatively inexpensively at a lot of department stores that are everywhere in Ontario. Like most Canadian Tires or Walmart would have them, but I would obviously ask that you go to the local bait store guy who is a lot more passionate about selling you that stuff and knows a lot more about the products he's selling you than the average Walmart worker is. Not downplaying Walmart workers, but if you go to a bait shop, they're going to be more passionate and knowledgeable about it. That's the bottom line. And the last thing I'll mention is with jigs, more often than not, people are using live bait with them. But I find, depending on the sizes, like if I'm going for panfish, I'll throw on a little tungsten jig and what's called what I've heard called microplastics, very tiny plastics on a tiny tungsten jig. Perch love them, and more examples here. And this is one of my favorites. The Northland tungsten with a liquid leech. But again, all these things are readily available at most department stores. And the last thing I'll show you out of here is examples of tube jigs. I find these work very well on certain species. Panfish and surprisingly the splake up here seem to really love them, and they come in all sorts of sizes. This is a giant 6-inch one that I'll try and target big splake with up here. But yeah, so you don't need to spend a lot of money right off the bat and buy all the expensive stuff. As I said, most of those essentials can be picked up relatively cheaply at most department stores. And you don't have to break the bank, but again, the cheapest way for anyone to get into ice fishing and learn to use the right gear on the lakes and find out what works, in my opinion, is to go and see one of your local guides first and try it out with someone else's equipment before you go out and buy all that stuff. Because even with taken into consideration that I just showed roughly the cheapest of the equipment available, by the time you buy the pop-up shelter, the auger, the 2 rods, because you're allowed to have 2 rods each out in ice fishing, a couple rod holders, say a 5-pack of each of those variety of lures, and by the time you buy your either plastics or live bait to go with the day, you're looking at least $600 right there to get all that gear. And I'm going to say that's conservative, finding them on sale prices and that. And many hut rentals or guide services are way less than $600 for the day. I know, at least with us here at Moose Basin, you can rent the entire outfit complete with sonar and all that for $150, and our guided trips start, depending on where you're going, at $350. So you can spend less to find out right away if you're going to like it and get expert advice by going to, I'm not saying come all the way up to Kapuskasing and buy me, that's too much for gas, but there are many operators on Nipissing, Simcoe, Hoople Creek, Bay of Quinte, lots of operators and lots of places that would love to show you the ropes and get you into it. And as always, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out to us and I will gladly help get you on your way. Or if you're watching this and interested in ice fishing and you're up in northeastern Ontario, swing on up to Kapuskasing, pop in, or reach out to us. Chances are we know someone in your town that would be willing to get you out. So don't hesitate to reach out to us here, and we'll do whatever we can. We'll contact whoever we know to help get you out on the hard water and enjoying what we love. And I'm hoping that if anyone is thinking about getting into ice fishing, that this gives you a little bit of an idea of what you're getting into and what you're going to need. I hope I didn't leave anything out. I probably did, because I didn't really take notes for this. I just kind of started talking. But it's a great sport to get into. You get to get out to a lot of really peaceful places a lot of the times, or if you go to ice fishing events, you get to meet a lot of really nice people that also enjoy getting out in the nature like you guys do. It's to me, it's a great way to spend some time with friends and that, and just enjoying nature, catching fish, and enjoying each other's company and some beautiful scenery. It's a great way to spend time, and I'm hoping that you've learned a little bit to help motivate you get into it and push you to getting out for the first time and making the right steps to make your first time out enjoyable and legal and safe. At the end of the day, that's what we're looking for, is a good, safe time out on the hard water. So we hope that you're reaching out to your local guides now and taking the right steps to get your fishing license and get yourself ready for some ice fishing. And I'm pretty sure you're going to get out there and love it. And then we'll be making videos and having discussions about what baits and all that you're going to be using to target what species, and get into a little more specific details about how to make the actual fishing you're doing better, as opposed to just how to get you out on the water for the first time. So we're hoping you get out there, and when you get out there, we're hoping you got tight lines. Have a good one, folks.